Good afternoon, 49er faithful. Welcome to another episode here of Friday Afternoon Quarterback. That's what came off the cuff. We're still working on that name. We got a lot of suggestions coming in for the Schuh and Hammer show that is going on here. I'm your host, Rob Schuh. That is my co-host for today's show, Jack Hammer of the Santa Rosa Press Democrat. How you doing this afternoon, Jack?
I'm doing good, Rob. How you doing?
I'm doing very well. I was just commenting to you before the show. I see I have the newest sneakerhead, the newest member on my channel, and lo and behold, it's my own father. It is my dad has become a member of my YouTube channel. At first, I was like, well, I probably shouldn't show that because that's, moderately embarrassing to bring it up and be like, yeah, my dad's a member of the channel. But actually, I think it's pretty cool. I love the fact that he came in and added himself to the channel. So shout out, Dad. I appreciate that.
No, that's awesome. And now he'll actually be able to have conversations with you because you'll let him on your show if he wants to call in and talk 49ers with you.
Yeah, exactly. He's going to know what's on the forefront of my mind. I mean, he knows it's always all about Niners, and he and I have that connection. I've told you this story many a time, that's sort of one of the special bonds we share as father and son is going to those games at Candlestick Park. I mean, I remember the entire journey up there. We used to ride those buses, the Caltrans buses from the Bay Area on the peninsula up to San Francisco. Those diesel fumes are burned into my sinuses very deep. And then we get there and just spend hours at the stick. And it's some of my fondest memories growing up.
Oh yeah, going to the 49er games. I know you did it with your dad. I spent a lot of Sundays and Mondays at Candlestick Park with my brother. We had our season tickets together, and those are memories that you just cherish. I mean, I did go to the game with my dad quite a few times as well, but going to Candlestick Park and being able to spend that time together is really special, and it always brings you something to talk about throughout the year.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. By the way, Bay Area Baller getting into the name debate here. There have been some good ones. Bay Area Baller, when you combine a Schuh and Hammer, I think steel toe. I mean, there's something to that. There was another one that the lawyer one was very good. And then someone brought up the idea of, somebody jacking somebody else's shoes. And so I thought, well, you could go play on words like that. Somebody jacked my shoe. And that would work in both days, but still very much a work in progress. We shall see. And then Philip pointing out, I'm glad that I finally made it. It seemed to take a while to hit that mark. I know last night I was at 5,999, and then a few bots get removed from the channel, and I was like 5,994. And I'm like, damn it, I'm so close to 6K. But it looks like today it has updated, and I did hit the 6,000 subscriber mark. And I got to say thank you to everybody who watches. Thank you to Jack and everyone that comes on with me. It's the phenomenal content that guys like you and I put out together that really gets people's interest, I believe. So in doing that, in talking about that, let's get to some of that content. And let's begin with the San Francisco 49ers making a leap of faith. And I'm interested to know just how much of a leap of faith you believe that to be, Jack. We're talking about going to Trey Lance, the young rookie. Sorry, getting a banner to cooperate with me here. How big of a leap of faith do you believe it is for the 49ers to move forward with Trey as a starter? Someone who's only had 19 starts since high school, somebody who's now going to be presumptively starting for a team that made the Final Four within the NFL, that has high expectations for next season. How big of a leap of faith do you believe it is to go to Trey Lance?
I don't think it's as big of a leap of faith as it would have been if they had tried to do this in 2021. They've been around Trey for a year now. They had a plan in place. From all the reports that you hear and from what I remember seeing of him back in training camp, especially in the beginning, he showed flashes of being able to be at the top of a very good quarterback in this league. There was just some things he's going to have to work on, and I think after a year of being in the system and everything. What we saw of him when he played in week 5, what we saw of him on the field in week 13, I don't think it's a huge leap of faith from the 49ers here to feel like they can move on with Trey Lance and be successful in 2022.
Do you think that we have seen enough in practices, in college tape, in the game film to definitively say that, what we saw glimpses of at North Dakota State is still the prevailing belief in Trey's skill set, that he does have those physical gifts, that he is improving within the NFL? Did you see that concrete evidence going from the start in week 5 to the start in week 17?
I feel like I did. When I watched his film at North Dakota State, I saw a guy who was hesitant to pull the trigger on certain throws.
Right.
And I didn't see that in week 17 as much as I had from his film. Even when I think back to really go back to week 5, I don't remember really seeing him hesitate to pull the trigger on throws. There were certain balls that you'd obviously like to see him be more consistent with, or be able to hit, like, for example, the interception to a wide open receiver when he overthrew him, things like that. But those are the reasons why you want to see that going forward.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, there's certainly more that you want to see from Trey Lance. I would have appreciated had Kyle Shanahan been able to work in 3 to 4 plays a game so that we would have some concrete idea of what we were getting beyond just the game against the Texans. But unfortunately, that's the sample size that we're going to get, and you have to operate a little bit on faith. The other point that I would like to make for those that take the side of, hey, this is too big of a leap of faith. You don't know what you have in the rookie. This is a team that's prepared to compete for the Super Bowl. You're hearing people on NFL Network, on ESPN, start to pump the brakes on this idea that, well, maybe they should revisit the idea of keeping Jimmy Garoppolo around for one more season just to make sure that while this Super Bowl window's open, they don't miss it. But don't all other choices also come with some level of risk? Even sticking with Jimmy Garoppolo would bring with it some considerable risks, right?
Yeah, I understand people who might want to stick with Jimmy Garoppolo or are nervous about making the changeover. There was some of that going back to 2013, right? After the 49ers and that was even after the 49ers had made the switch midseason from Alex Smith to Colin Kaepernick. There was still folks going into that offseason in 2013 that really wanted the 49ers to figure out a way to keep both of them. They wanted to see Colin Kaepernick on the team, but they also felt like the 49ers needed to keep Alex Smith. And I was one of them. I felt that if there was a way that they could keep both, that would have been the perfect storm for the 49ers. I kind of feel that's the same way with them now, but it's just not possible with the way that the salary cap works. And so they've got to move on with the player that they feel gives them the best chance to win. And that's, Jimmy Garoppolo did a lot of winning for the 49ers, but at this point, everybody's ready to move on. And I think it's time to make a clean break and make that leap of faith for Trey Lance. And I think the 49ers are going to be just fine as a result.
I tend to agree. This is the time to make the leap. I think that you have to have some faith that what you've seen is a precursor to that ability that's there. And I think that going back to this idea of there's risk in anything you do, to me, this is the path that follows the strongest logic to make the move to Lance at this point. That, yeah, you could get conservative and say, I want to bring Jimmy Garoppolo back because I think that he gives us a better chance to win. But that conservative approach to me would be the wrong logical choice and would carry with it its own considerable risk around him getting injured, around it not being able to build out the rest of the roster as you need to, as you would be able to if you move on to Lance. So to me, that's something that I would definitely look at. I mean, to me, that's just the obvious choice, that you move on to Lance and that these folks that are suggesting potentially keeping Jimmy around are not as close to the situation. I just don't know that the locker room could put up with another year of that. In transitioning to our next topic here, a little question around bargain bin shopping. This came up because Jesse Naylor, who you have on your program, Hammer and Nails, was talking about the Niners' ability to clear some cap space. And I think within this community and within the Twitter community of 49er faithful, it brought up the idea of, well, man, the 49ers actually have considerable options to clear up cap space. So they do have some options to clear cap space. They could use that to go after their own free agents and maybe even a big name or two. My question to you, Jack, is do you believe that the Niners will do that? Will they clear up considerable cap space and make some moves this offseason?
Yeah, I know. I'm not sure. I'm not familiar with what Jesse said on there, but I wrote an article for the Press Democrat talking about this a couple of weeks ago, where they can clear up a lot of space by moving, doing a new deal with Eric Armstead, Jimmy Ward, and there's some other guys too that they could move money around or do new deals with, like Samson Ebicom was another one. Uh, and that's what the Flyers are going to need to do, I think, period, regardless, to get underneath the salary cap and be able to even sign the guys that they want to come back from their own team, as well as their draft picks. Because right now the 49ers are $4 million under the cap,
Right.
over the cap, excuse me. So, when they open up the year, right, they've got to make some moves just to get underneath the number for the start of the new year. And then you figure their draft picks are going to take up about, I think it's 7 to 8 million. So now at that point you're down, that would be, when they trade Garoppolo, I think that gives them about 19 million.
That sounds about right.
Right. And then you've got to move some other guys around a little bit. And so they have space. They're not in a bad spot. They're actually, the 49ers are in one of the better spots in the NFL in the NFC West, especially when you compare where they are right now to where, for example, the Seattle Seahawks and the Cardinals and the Rams, they're in a good spot. I think the Seahawks might be in the best spot of all of them at this point. But right. I don't know how many players they have signed and all that kind of thing. But the 49ers are in a decent spot. They can move money around and they're going to be okay. I don't know about them spending big on any one position, but they definitely will have money to go out and re-sign their own guys that they want and bring in a few, as you said here in the title, bargain bin guys that can come in and be valuable for them. That's what they did last year.
Yeah, I tend to see that as the target strategy for the Niners as well, that they'll create a little bit of cap space, that they need to create a little bit of cap space by an extension or two, but that it won't be, hey, let's extend everyone that we possibly can in order to free up some gargantuan amount of cap space to go out and take big swings. And part of the reason I believe that is prudent, I think twofold. One, you have a very talented roster, and therefore don't necessarily need to go out and take huge cuts, huge swings at the pitch, because if you can focus on bringing back your own players, make that the priority, rebuild the roster in the way in which it was constructed this year, add in the draft picks that hopefully can contribute a little quicker in more instances than the 2021 draft picks were able to, count on the fact that some 2021 draft picks are going to get better, and count on the fact that Trey Lance offers a potential upgrade from Jimmy Garoppolo. So all those factors play into being a bit more prudent. But I also think, and I'm interested to get your take on this, I also believe that the San Francisco 49ers may want to play a little bit of wait and see in 2022. They could clear up some cap space by extending some key players. I don't know that they would want to, but they could. It is an option. If they did so, they could take some big cuts this year. They could attempt to bring in some real studs and say, hey, listen, the Super Bowl window is open right now. We are going for it. But they don't act, to our point, our last topic, they don't actually know how ready Trey Lance is going to be. So perhaps it is more prudent to wait until they've seen at least part of the season from Trey Lance to understand whether the window for the Super Bowl truly is open in 2022.
I don't know if they're going to see him wait. I think they're going to be aggressive. It's not in the 49ers' nature to make big splash signings in free agency, right? We haven't really seen them do that. We've seen them bring in some big name guys like Richard Sherman and things like that. But that wasn't
or a big trade with D Ford.
Right. But we're not, so we've seen them make moves like that, but they usually don't overspend in terms of free agency.
That's a good point.
What I would expect to see from them is, like, everybody's talking about how they need to re-sign Laken Tomlinson, and then you get the report this week from Jeremy Fowler with ESPN, where basically the report is that the 49ers are going to wait until closer to free agency to start the negotiations with Tomlinson. What I think you're going to see is the 49ers wait to see what these guys are being offered on the market before they make a move. They have their number that they've kind of hit, and it's, if Laken Tomlinson doesn't get the number he's looking for, they'll be more than happy to bring him back. But we're not going to we're not going to see them go to 10 or 12 million, I don't think, to bring back a guy like Tomlinson.
That's smart. I mean, as much as I want them to reassemble this roster, as much as I want the San Francisco 49ers to absolutely prioritize bringing back their own players, you can't handicap yourself in that way. You can't overpay for someone that you have all the information you need in order to determine value, right? I mean, the Niners know Laken Tomlinson. They should know what they're prepared to pay him, and that should be a pretty firm number for them, right? They have all the necessary inputs to make that decision at this point. I'm going to bring in 49ers first takes. Aaron with the super chat coming in. Old tired question as you guys talk cap dollars. How do the Rams afford to seemingly every year land the top big star, even though they lack cap like us? I'll take the first swing at this, although I will preface it by saying that I am not a cap expert, not a cap guru, but the cap offers, this is my understanding of it. Jack, I'm interested to hear your take as well. The cap offers a set of guidelines that you have to work within, parameters, rules, if you will. But within those rules, anything goes. As long as you don't violate one of the core rules of the cap, one of those being, for example, that at the start of the new league year, you cannot be over the cap. So the 49ers will have to release a player, restructure a contract, trade Jimmy G. Something has to happen before the start of the league year because, to your point, they are right now technically over the cap. What I will say, though, is if you have an owner that has considerable cash, and Jed York has considered, the York family has considerable cash, that gives you greater flexibility within the cap. And that's why you see teams with very rich owners being able to do things that smaller franchises can't. Jerry Jones has a crap load of money. I almost just dropped an F-bomb right there. Crunky, whatever Stan's name is, has a lot of money. And so they can pull it forward and kick the can down the road, meaning they can take the contract, turn it into cash today, give it to that player as a signing bonus, and just extend the contract and thereby kick that money down the road. At some point in time, all those cap dollars get accounted for within the structure of the rules. It's just pushing it further and further down the road. Does that sound right to you, Jack?
That's 100% correct. It's exactly what they do. And I had this argument with folks last year when it was, the discussion was around, should the 49ers have moved on from the defensive tackle that they traded out to DeForest Buckner. It was the players don't care what their cap number is because their cap number doesn't represent what they're getting paid in any given year.
Right.
The money to the player is what matters. And so when what you're talking about is you give them this large signing bonus up front, then, instead of me having to play out 3 years to get this money, I'm getting it all right now. And then in future years on my paycheck's not going to be quite as much, but that's okay. Because I already had the money in the bank and it's already working for me somewhere else if they're investing it properly or whatever. Right. And that's the same situation that's happening here. And you're right, cash. That's why it's important for the owners to have a lot of cash so that they can make those kind of moves. And that's one of the reasons why, like a team like the Raiders, for example, who's somewhat cash poor, struggles with making moves like that.
Yeah. And the player realizes, as strange as it may sound, when a team approaches them to give them a bunch of cash as a signing bonus, the player understands they actually have the leverage there. The team needs them to take that deal and is then tempting them with that cash up front. But that player's agent is then turning around to the team and saying, okay, great. I know that you need this cap flexibility. We're willing to work with you, and we want a little bit more money in this particular year of the deal. It gives some leverage to the player in that instance. And therefore, if you're looking at players where the team is skeptical about them long-term, it becomes very tricky as to whether you want to free up money by committing to someone even further that you may not see in your long-term plans. And so to me, it'll be fascinating to watch who the 49ers choose to extend, because I think it speaks to how they value that player in their future plans.
Absolutely correct. That's right. They want the upfront money. There's two things that players want. They want the signing bonus because that's the money they get cash in hand right now, and they're worried about guaranteed money. The rest of the stuff, they don't care. They don't care if their cap hits 3 million or 20 million, as long as it's, it doesn't matter to them. Obviously, they want it to. They're fine with it being lower if it's helping the team. But the cap hit has nothing to do with what a player gets paid in the year, and that's one of the things that I argued so hard about with the trying to get people to understand when we were talking about the deal there for Buckner.
I agree. And more clarification, we'll be getting into this. And this may pass beyond my comfort zone, so I'm going to speak to it. But, as I said before, preface it by saying I am not a cap expert. I am educated on it, but not an expert, not proclaiming myself to be. LA Blue 49. So if a player's signing bonus is the only guarantee money with their contract, why aren't they willing to restructure more often? So I would clarify that that's not the only guaranteed money. Guaranteed money is established within the language of the contract, and so it is therefore up to negotiation. You can guarantee as much or as little of that contract as you want. Go back to the Kirk Cousins scenario where his agent felt they have the leverage that they needed to negotiate basically the entirety of his contract as a guaranteed salary. The NFL is an anomaly when it comes to sports leagues as far as non-guaranteed contracts, and it's the most violent sport. It's a wild scenario, very strange indeed. We will reach a point in time where we get to a point where I think we have guaranteed contracts. We're not there. So yes, the signing bonus is absolutely guaranteed, but there is guaranteed money through the rest of the contract. But to the rest of your question, why aren't players more willing to restructure more frequently? I believe players are pretty open for the most part to restructures. The times they wouldn't be is if they feel that their contract is coming to a close at a time beneficial to them. If I think I'm going to hit free agency at the end of a year where I'm performing extremely well, then I want to get to free agency. I don't want to lock myself down. So if you're in your prime earning years, you may choose free agency and a bidding war over money from your own team, because in that instance, you're negotiating before you know what your value is with other people, and that takes away a little bit of your leverage. Jack, what are your thoughts?
No, you're right there on the right track there. I mean, it's definitely, signing bonus isn't the only guaranteed money. The signing bonus is the guaranteed money that they get right then when they sign it that year, and then the guaranteed money is negotiated between the team and the player, and it depends on how far out that goes and where it hits. But the biggest piece when you're looking at it from from a player standpoint, you're right, Rob. If you're in prime earning years, you want to make sure that you're getting the biggest signing bonus and the most guaranteed money that you can, because that's the money that you're going to be guaranteed, and that for however long it is. You could have a 6-year contract, but really only have guaranteed money through 3 years. And so it's being smart about the way you're working it out.
Yes, it is about doing it in an intelligent way. And thankfully for the 49ers, as much as fans may give him some grief because of a few deals here and there, I think Barag is a phenomenal executive when it comes to creatively structuring contracts. And I have faith that the Niners will be able to do what they want to get done in this offseason. It's just a question of what their desire is. I'm going to bring in Jack 510. This is Jack's burner, by the way. So, it's self-promoting. No, I'm kidding. He comes in and says, smash the like button for these two goats. I put it up because it is the off season and your likes do matter at this point in time. It's also the point in the show where I like to say that I am a phenomenal fan of Jack and his work, and all of his links are down in the description of this video. To follow him on Twitter, to go subscribe to his YouTube channel, and most importantly, to bookmark the Press Democrat blog that is listed there as well, and visit it on a daily basis because there's constantly great content coming out. I was just reading through a phenomenal article that you put out this morning about the San Francisco 49ers backup quarterback situation, in which you list off basically every freaking backup quarterback that I wanted to know about and gave me great information about it. So thank you for that, Jack.
Thank you. Yeah, no, that was one I've been thinking about for a while, and I need to get it out there because everybody's excited about this backup quarterback spot. And the hot name is Tyrod Taylor. And my one question for anybody that's really spouting off on Tyrod Taylor is, why did the 49ers not even talk to Tyrod Taylor last year when they were heavy on chasing quarterbacks? That was the one name that wasn't in. I understand the connection to Anthony Lynn, but they didn't talk to him at all last year. And so that gives you a little bit of a pause. But I will say that they did talk to him in 2017. So it's an interesting piece there.
I loved how you separated it out in that fashion of players that have been sort of linked to the 49ers, whether it's by fans or media members during this limited offseason, but then going back and looking at, hey, we've got some actual evidence that we can use in this conversation. And it's quarterbacks that they flirted with when they were legitimately looking at bringing somebody in last year. We know they flirted with a bunch of them. And that was a very enlightening way in which you visited that topic. Again, I think it's fantastic, and people should follow the link to go read it for themselves this afternoon. Continuing along the same plane of existence with regard to bargain bin shopping, but in referencing specifically the San Francisco 49ers secondary, they have a ton of their own free agents. Can't possibly re-sign them all when it comes to around the team. But do you think specifically with Jaquiski Tartt being a free agent, you've got K'Wan Williams, free agent, you have people calling for depth at outside corner as well, within those being positions the 49ers have shown us they don't necessarily value as far as investing considerable assets. Do you think that the 49ers get a bit cheap about these positions in the secondary?
I think so. I think, and you kind of hit on it, the 49ers under this regime have shown that they don't value secondary players at the same level as they do the pass rush. They build their defense from the front back. They feel their philosophy is that if you have a strong pass rush, the back end takes care of itself, which there's a lot of truth to that. For me, I would like to see them. I think we might see them stay that route. I'd like to see them maybe splurge a little bit and go after a guy like Justin Reed, who's, I think, a phenomenal free safety and allows them to play Jimmy Ward down inside more often. And maybe in some way, getting a guy like Justin Reed would allow him to be your maybe play in the slot a little bit more while still being a safety and things like that. And if it's not him, I would stick with another Reed and go with DJ Reed, who they let go to ended up going to Seattle when they got a little too cute a couple of years ago. Because I think he's a really strong player in that he can play outside and inside, and which would solve the 49ers issues. They had a guy that can start on the outside, he can slide down into the slot, and then you have Ambry Thomas and Emmanuel Mosley, who would be playing on the outside in that situation. It kind of gives them something similar to what we saw with them with the 49ers back in 2011 and 2012 when they were making that run.
And you know that the San Francisco 49ers value versatility. If there's something they have shown us about players they're willing to invest in, versatility is a trait that's top of the list for them. It's interesting to me because you do have multiple positions within basically that same group. You have the question of, do they let Tartt walk and sort of just allow Hufanga and Tavarius Moore, who is now back on that strange fourth year of a deal because he missed the year due to injury. I actually thought that year would count towards his vesting as a veteran, that he would be a free agent. But NFL rules are structured in such a way that however it worked out for him, he's back on contract. So you could see them going inexpensive there. And then certainly they could roll with Emmanuel Mosley and Ambry Thomas on the outside and think, hey, we're good at starters, so therefore we'll just bring in a couple of B, C players that add some depth, but don't necessarily push for that starting role. And then you certainly could say that they may let K'Wan Williams walk, and it would be nice to bring in someone like DJ Reed. For those that don't remember, the Niners did get cute on that one. They attempted to let him go with injury, thinking he would revert to the practice squad, and Seattle swooped in and grabbed him, and he looked pretty damn good for him last year. If there were one of those three scenarios that you hope the 49ers don't go cheap on, if you had to prioritize one of those positions, would you go after the strong safety spot, the first name that you threw out there, and Justin Reed?
I think so. I think so from the standpoint that matches up with kind of what the 49ers plan has always been, to build themselves to be strong up the middle. I think so, because he also allows them to play a little bit more if they want to get into a little bit more cover three. Like I said, that would allow him to be the single high safety and Jimmy Ward to be the guy that comes down and plays more around the box and gets more involved with those types of plays. And Jimmy Ward talked a lot last year about wanting to get more involved in terms of turnovers and things like that. We saw him do that at times this year, but at the same time, having Justin Reed and Jimmy Ward in your backfield on the deep end would really help out those corners as well.
Just a further hypothetical, if they spend those free agency dollars on Justin Reed and then allow K'Wan Williams to exit gracefully in free agency, as you could argue that he's great in run defense for a nickel, but has lost a step, potentially half a step. I don't want to take shots at K'Wan here, but it seemed as though that was the case. Would you envision a scenario where the Niners are rolling with just Diamador Lenore right off of the bat, or you think they're bringing in someone that's a lower level free agent or a higher level draft pick to compete for that starting role at nickel? Uh-oh, did we freeze Jack? That may have been too much of a question. I locked it up. Uh-oh. We're close. We're getting back. You can see it's unfolding. It is unfolding in front of us.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. Did you catch that question, or should I repeat it?
No, if you could repeat it, it went out on me right before you.
Absolutely.
Finished.
So if they go that route with Jaquiski, not with Jaquiski Tartt, with Eric Reed, let's say that they say priority is strong safety. We're going to spend some of those free agency dollars on a strong safety. They now do have the biggest hole at nickel cornerback, especially if they do let K'Wan Williams go. In this further hypothetical, acknowledging we are in a hypothetical space, would you say that the Niners are more likely to simply roll with Diamador Lenore as the presumed starter for next year at nickel, or would they bring in some B-level free agents or mid-level draft picks to compete for that starting spot, in your mind?
Most likely it would be somebody like a Diamador Lenore or a free agent that they come bring in that's a straight free agent, maybe even Dante Johnson fights in that role a little bit because we did see him play there, and they bring him back. I think that the target with Lenore was more for him to play in the slot than to play outside all along to begin with.
Right. That makes perfect sense to me. Again, my hope is that the 49ers really prioritize bringing back the vast majority of their free agents, because again, it seems like the type of team where if you can upgrade at quarterback from Jimmy Garoppolo to the more physically gifted Trey Lance, and he is able to complete some of those simpler, not uncomplicated, not they are difficult, but they are simple. The simple passes over the middle that Jimmy Garoppolo was so good at, that you could see the 49ers making a run again. So another area that the 49ers have to focus on with regard to their own free agents is the offensive line. So I wanted to bring in that topic now because it is arguably 80% in flux right now. And that's pretty crazy, right? You look at Trent Williams. Trent Williams is locked down. He is not going anywhere. He seems to be very healthy, very happy. You would think he recovers from the elbow injury just fine. He played through stuff at the end of the year. So that's locked down. But then Laken Tomlinson, free agent and could be earning a bag. We talked about that earlier. Niners may not want to match whatever other teams are willing to give. Alex Mack, apparently contemplating retirement. I tend to think that he's coming back, but I mean, we don't really have any additional information there. Right guard is completely unsettled, and then right tackle is coming off of a quad tear, which, as I understand it, is a very significant injury, and one that until you see the person play again, you can't really be certain that they come back at full strength. And so it's odd to me that this goes from a team strength to what could become a weakness if they don't address it. Do you see the 49ers prioritizing this position group to ensure that this potential of 80% influx doesn't materialize into 4 new bodies?
Yeah, I would really hope that we don't see 4 new offensive linemen for the 49ers here in 2022. That would be really rough because the offensive line group is one that needs to be cohesive and kind of be able to stick together to be at their best. So if that's the case, might be a little bit tough in all of our predictions of the 49ers, being able to get back to where they were in 2021. really wouldn't matter because you need to have guys up front that can block. The one thing I will say about the 49ers, though, is I think we've talked about this before. I feel like they've done a really good job of building a bench throughout their organization at all the levels,
That's
whether it be
very
in
true.
their front office or in their coaching staff or on the roster as well. Because center is a spot that's a tough one for them because I don't really feel like they have a center that's on their team right now, unless you're going to bring, Jake Brendel back and have him be your starting center. But,
Right.
I do feel pretty comfortable with the thought of Aaron Banks being my starting left guard next year. I feel pretty comfortable with if push came to shove and I wasn't bringing anybody from any other teams, I think that Colton McKivitz could start at right guard for me.
Okay.
He started right guard for the 49ers 3 times in 2020.
Right.
And wasn't all that bad over there. The center position is the big one because you also have Jalen Moore that can play right tackle. If you don't even and those are moves that I'm talking about where you don't even have to really bring anybody back. You already have Moore. You already have Banks. McKivitz is a guy who I believe is an exclusive rights free agent. So you're going to be able to bring him back for cheap. So we're really talking about center at that point. And the 49ers need to keep that group cohesive if they can. And hopefully Mike McGlinchey comes back. But I don't know how much priority that's going to take, but I definitely wouldn't be surprised to see them go offensive lineman round 2 or 3.
Yeah, it is something that has to be prioritized. By the way, just going to bring in Jeremy here with the super chat because he's just throwing out kind words. And you know that I'm going to put kind words up onto the screen. Jeremy Ownby coming in. Good show. I appreciate that, Jeremy. Jack does as well. We love putting on a good show for the Niner faithful out there watching. To me, this group and the focus of the San Francisco 49ers on the offensive line is paramount. You cannot shift to a young quarterback that's bursting onto the scene and just give him chaos in front of him, right? Provide an offensive line that is not cohesive, that has not had an opportunity to work together. And some of these things are shall we say, out of the 49ers' control. They can do things to back up against the potential outcome. They can insulate themselves, so to speak. But at center, it's up to Alex Mack, whether he wants to come back or not. I tend to lean towards him coming back. I don't think you sign the 3-year deal without the intention of playing 2 years in it. I understand that it could have been done to spread the cap hit out, but my gut says Alex Mack comes back. And then you have to hope that Mike McGlinchey comes back at right tackle. So that really just leaves 40% of the offensive line in flux. And we're going to have to wait to find out the answer to that. My hope is that the 49ers prioritize bringing back Laken Tomlinson, because I would much rather go into the season with 4 out of 5 returning and Aaron Banks stepping in at that right guard, as opposed to Aaron Banks at left guard, McKivitz at right guard, or some type of a rookie scenario or a free agent. To me, the hope is that they bring in somebody else. If you had to predict right now, Jack, which of those 5 positions will be a new player in 2022? Any? 2? 1? And if so, which?
Probably there might be one. I agree with you. I think you get Trent Williams on the left side. I agree that you get Alex Mack coming back in the middle. I think I think Aaron Banks really slots in really nice at left guard, considering that's where he played throughout his career at Notre Dame. And it makes sense that maybe they drafted him a year early with the expectation that he's going to slide in there at the left side once Tomlinson's contract is up. And then on the right side, you're hoping that you get back Mike McGlinchey. All reports show that he's making good progress. I understand that injury that he had to his what is it, quad muscle? Is one that's tough to come back from. It's about a 50-50 kind of a deal. But if he can come back, you're set up there. It's really about the right guard position, and Daniel Brunskill did fine. I would like to see them upgrade at that role, that spot, if they can. If Mike McGlinchey's capable of playing at the level he was playing before he got hurt, right guard is the one that they need to improve on. And that's an interesting one, because do they want to keep Jalen Moore at tackle, or do they want to slide him inside and have him play guard? I understand that he might be a little bit better as a tackle. I know he's played a little bit of guard when he was in college as well. And there's a lot of different things. And maybe they don't do any of that, and they just go out and they draft a guy in the second or third round, and that's the guy they choose to slot in there.
And to your point earlier, like, I will criticize the San Francisco 49ers if they don't prioritize bringing back Laken Tomlinson, if they allow this flux to turn into significant turnover. But to your point earlier, they have done a pretty phenomenal job at developing or adding depth at that position. There are not very many teams within the NFL that have suitable backups. There are not many teams within the NFL that have suitable starting lineups, right? And so it is something to be commended that the 49ers have added these key figures that could step in if called upon.
I think this is an interesting topic because you can go back to 2020 when the 49ers were dealing with so many injuries. If even during that season when they had McKivitz having to play all over the place and Justin Schools having to play right tackle, and those were your that was your right guard and your left tackle, I think in week 16, and they almost beat the Seahawks that week. You know, what it really points to is if you have a quarterback, like to the question earlier about how do the Rams keep doing what they're doing, the Rams are also able to get by with it because they have a heck of a quarterback. Yeah. A lot of these teams are getting by with doing that, maybe not having the best players at certain positions because they have a quarterback that can get out there in the game in the fourth quarter with money on the line and make the play that brings it home for them and things like that. And, you know, I feel like with the move to Trey Lance, I think that Lance will be just fine as long as they can give him a little bit of protection. And I think that we're maybe overdoing it a little bit with the thought that they have such a bad offensive line. I feel like they were close. There was a team that in 2020, if Jimmy Garoppolo was on the field, the 49ers are in the playoffs in 2020. That's just be realistic about it.
I think that's a fair statement.
You know, and that was with all the injuries that they were having all over the field. And so I feel like the 49ers are in a pretty good spot. And you're right. They do have a pretty good depth throughout their team, especially around the offensive line compared to other players. I mean, look what they did. They pulled McKivitz. McKivitz is the guy that they released in training camp that they brought back. And he started week 18 for him and helped him get into the playoffs.
Agreed. Bullpup asks in here at Rob, is Banks ready? Just to the point that I think Jack already hit. You could, while he struggled in camp, while he was unable to crack the roster, once he struggled in camp, the likelihood of him cracking the roster was tough. He just didn't have many opportunities after that. So it's difficult to say what he would have looked like had he gotten the opportunity. But Jack made the astute point, which is all of his college career was the left side. So if they let go of Laken Tomlinson and he's able to play that side he's more familiar with, look back at Penei Sewell and the transition for him. Struggled through training camp. All the reports came out, not going to be a good shift from left tackle to right tackle because he played left tackle at Oregon. And then lo and behold, an injury eliminates the left tackle. He swings over and looks pretty darn good doing it. So it is a big transition from left guard to right guard. And I do think that if he went back, you could assume he would look better.
And I would say the one thing on that piece too, is we didn't really get to see much of Aaron Banks. He only made it into the Kansas City game in preseason. So that was only about 3.5 weeks of training camp. And then he was out until week 1. So that really put him behind the 8 ball. So I know a lot of people say, oh, you know, what we saw of him wasn't very good. Well, for the most part, you didn't really see anything of him because you only saw him for about a quarter of one preseason game because he wasn't around throughout the rest of training camp. And that makes it hard for even me to tell you where he is because we don't get a chance to see them in contact drills once training camp ends.
Yes, it is unfortunate. When is the NFL going to realize the more access they give us, the better for them? Like we get incensed with practice footage and with access. So NFL, if you're watching, just let us in. Just let us film it all. Just let us talk about it all because I guarantee the bottom line for you will increase. And I know that's what you're after, NFL. I just have to bring it in because CJ Gray, out of context, I don't know where it came from, but he's speaking facts. At Rob, we need that ring. CJ, yes, we frickin' do. At all costs, my friend. William Bennett with the super chat. Great show, fellas. I think the Niners work magic on the D-line like most years, but I think it's the O-line that I'm worried. That worries me and should be a big issue. Protect Trey Lance. I agree wholeheartedly, William, in that it should be a priority for the San Francisco 49ers. Jack, I believe I have heard you mention it before, but as we look at evidence in what the 49ers have done previously at various positions, the evidence in getting cheap in the secondary is very strong. There is also evidence that indicates the 49ers don't necessarily value the guard spots quite as much as we may want them to in this instance where Laken Tomlinson's deal is on the line. And that could come into play if other teams get into that bidding war, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, they've shown that they value tackles on the offensive line like they value defensive linemen. Center and guard, not so much. They feel like they can get by with that. And quite frankly, when you look at Mike Shanahan's history, that was kind of that way as well. It wasn't always like the big name guy. Even the 49er history, right? How many centers and guards in the 49ers history have been high level draft picks? Most of those guys have been, either free agent acquisitions or middle round draft picks that have played in the middle. And I think, Randy Cross, I think might have been an early round draft pick, but that was back in 77 or something like that. I don't know. I couldn't tell you the last time the 49ers spent high in the draft. I mean, I know the Banks won at second, but I don't know beyond that how often they've really spent that kind of capital.
I mean, you're pulling up some good gets from way back that I wouldn't be able to remember. And I watched all of that. I followed the Niners at that point, but I could not tell you what round anybody was drafted in at any point in the 80s or 90s, save for maybe Joe Montana. All right, let's transition into that next topic. It's got to come up. I know there's going to be some folks in the chat that are like, come on, Tom Brady again. It's never going to frickin' happen. And I tend to agree for the most part that I stick with my original prediction of a 5% chance, a 1 in, no, I think I predicted a 1% chance, a 1 in 100. So I'm going to stick with that. Maybe I could go between 1 and 5. It is unlikely is my stance. That's what I'm saying here. But we had some tweets coming out from Rich Ornberger, who used to play for the Patriots, so could have some inlet to Tom Brady. Should 49er fans continue to hope for the GOAT? Well, this is what we heard this morning. Heard some interesting things recently. The Tom Brady and Bruce Arians honeymoon was over in Tampa. The retirement announcement wasn't because of the trouble seeing eye to eye on the offensive game planning, but the relationship was souring. Apparently, while Arians was rehabbing the Achilles in the early mornings, offensive coordinator Byron Leftwich and Brady would work on the week's game plan. Arians would later come in and take the red pen to work they'd done. The quarterback and offensive coordinator felt undermined. There was tension. So this says nothing about the San Francisco 49ers, Jack, but it does indicate that Tom Brady may have left Tampa not because he feels he's done with football, but because he was done with Tampa Bay. If you're reading the tea leaves on this one, Jack, what are you coming up with?
Well, there's a couple of things. I'll start off by saying that what he's saying, the fact that this is coming up, this has been happening ever since Brady's announcement that he was going to retire, right? That Brady's not retired. He's going to come back. He's going to this and that. The Ornberger thing, I kind of just read through this for a second with me for a minute. He says the retirement announcement wasn't because of the trouble seeing eye to eye on the offensive game planning, but the relationship was souring. Okay. So what he said there was that it wasn't because of offensive game planning, right? Then you go to his second tweet, and in his second tweet, he tells you that Leftwich and Brady had worked all morning on the game plan, and then Arians would come in and change it. So
yeah, he's like, so it's not about the offensive game planning, but it was about the offensive game planning.
100%. It's funny. So I don't know. Was a relationship souring there to some extent? Maybe. I definitely think there's always more to the story than we know. But there's been enough chatter about this. I mean, almost right away, there were numerous reports that this isn't going to be a long-term situation for Brady. Right. So I do feel like there's just so much smoke around it that it'd be interesting. I'll be surprised if there's no fire at the end of by the time training camp comes around.
I agree. The only clear message in these tweets, if true, is that Tom Brady had a little bit of, an additional reason to step away from the Bucs, that it may not have been football related. I like the way in which Akash Anavarathan said on Twitter, put it out, I believe to my core that Tom Brady didn't retire because he's done with football. Feels like it was driven by Tampa, Arians, and all the drama with the Buccaneers. Does he return? No idea, but clearly there's more to this story. And so for those that may be frustrated hearing about Tom Brady, just recognize that we have to continue to talk about it as long as it remains a possibility. It is the greatest quarterback of all time. You could try to argue for Joe Montana, and I would listen, but even I have come around to the idea of calling Tom Brady the GOAT. If he's going to be available, everybody is going to want to speak with him. If he is not fully retired, it will be a topic of conversation, not just for 49er faithful, but for everyone around the league. And to me, it's for good reason. It's Tom Brady. You have to talk about it. You have to acknowledge it as long as it is a possibility. All right, but that's enough. That's enough, Tom Brady. We have given the GOAT his due. Let's transition to another player that had a key role in one of Tom Brady's Super Bowl wins, Malcolm Butler potentially exploring a comeback. So I honestly wasn't terribly familiar with what had happened. So just as a refresher for myself and anyone listening that may not have been familiar with it either, he was with the Tennessee Titans after his time with New England, and he was there for 3 years. And then in free agency, joined on with the Arizona Cardinals last season. It was a scenario where he did struggle in camp for Arizona, but then it seems of his own volition stepped away from the team. And recently, just today, was now released by Arizona from their reserve/retired list. So he is, to my understanding, an available free agent at this point. The Niners clearly have a need for depth at cornerback. I don't know what he's got left in the tank, but his last year at Tennessee was nothing to snooze at. Would you be interested if you were the San Francisco 49ers, Jack?
I don't know. This is one of those situations that I struggle with because it doesn't seem to me like he's really been playing very well. I mean, I think that was part of the reason why they moved off from him and he went to Arizona. And
right,
I don't really know what happened with him there. But if it's a personal, like if there's any kind of an issue in terms of his behavior and things like that, I think the 49ers would steer clear of him. This would be one that I would probably say that they wouldn't touch.
I would think they might explore it, but you're right when you bring that up. My thought was around just needing bodies in the room. But when you look at someone who stepped away from the game, now you're talking about a different situation. And I was just listening to a podcast in which Joe Williams' name was brought to the forefront. So I do have a now more recent recollection of, if there's somebody who's willing to step away from the game, maybe let them go. Maybe their heart isn't fully in it at this point in time.
Joe Williams, that's a blast from the past right there.
Right?
Yeah, that's funny. If you'll indulge me for a minute, I was looking back when I was doing some stuff, getting ready for that article I put out earlier today as far as the quarterback situation. And I read an article from last season in which they were saying that the 49ers should move on from Jimmy Garoppolo and make Josh Rosen the quarterback. And no, it wasn't from Grant. It was from somebody else who was actually suggesting that Josh Rosen be the 49ers quarterback in 2022. It's amazing what we talk about at this time of the year sometimes.
I love it. I mean, let's freely admit this mea culpa, but I still think that, hey, if you go back in time, like the Niners might actually have their 6th ring. I did put out the article for SI that was the logical case for drafting Kyle Pitts at 3 overall, right? And I tried to make a logical argument for it. It was just a fun mental exercise while we all did jumping jacks waiting for the 49ers to decide or tell us who they were going to draft last year. That was a stressful frickin' time period between when they traded for the number 3 pick and actually made the number 3 pick. But yes, there's a lot of speculation this time of year.
If you were of the belief that the quarterback that ended up going to Minnesota, I think in round 3, I'm blanking on his name right now, but there was a lot of people who were really high on him.
Yes.
And I wrote an article as well that, let's play a game. And it was basically, let's think outside the box with the 49ers. And I said the same thing, go with Pitts at 3. And then you're picking up, the Texas A&M, Kellen Mond, you're picking him up in the third round.
Yes.
And you're doing all these, you're getting a cornerback in the second round. I mean, that's what we do at this time of the year, right? It's fun. It's discussion. Malcolm Butler is a guy, if you bring him in, you're bringing him in to fight for a spot on your roster. You're not planning on signing him to be the guy. You're hoping that maybe he can come in and surprise and be a guy who for $1 million plays out of his mind, kind of like what you saw from Jason Verrett in 2020.
Speaking of which, off the cuff, this isn't a planned topic, so I don't have a heading for it, but it is another player that was released and one that feels a little bit more relevant to the San Francisco 49ers. I'm intrigued by Dante Fowler. Just your quick thoughts. Do you think the 49ers kicked the tires there? To me, it feels like a match made in heaven, both for Dante Fowler in a 1-year deal to get his next bag and the 49ers in attempting to replace Dee Ford.
Who was that again?
Dante Fowler. He was cut by the Atlanta Falcons earlier in the week. That's a name who I remember. I think it was just even last year. In recent history, we were talking about Dante Fowler coming to the 49ers, and he ended up landing in Atlanta. That's another name. I know that Splash Cousin over on Twitter. I can blank on his name right now, but he was talking about this as being somebody that the 49ers could take a look at. Dante Fowler would be one of those guys you take a flyer on, and you hope that he comes here cheap and Chris Kasarik can work his magic and make him a bunch of money to go off somewhere else. Yeah, just because it was what inspired me with the thoughts. Jordan Elliott wrote a great article about that for Niners Nation, so I wanted to throw that out there. Shout out to Jordan Elliott. He is a fantastic writer, as is Jack.
Thank you for getting the name right.
Yes, absolutely. Bringing in William Bennett just in closing on his thoughts on Tom Brady. I think also that Brady may blame the coach for losing Antonio Brown for the treatment of him. Just a thought. I certainly, there could be some validity to that. It does seem as though Tom Brady had a warm spot in his heart for Antonio Brown. And, as much as you can blame Antonio for the way in which that unfolded in game, I'm sure there's some blame to go around to Bruce Arians, right? He had 50% of that conversation that led to Antonio Brown ripping off his shirt and feeling that he had been insulted in that instance. I'm sure that we could make a better assessment of who's more to blame in that scenario if we had been a fly on the wall there. But a conversation takes two. So could Brady feel like a friend of his was disrespected in that process? Yes. I'm not sure how much that would factor into his decision here. I would think it would be more to do with his own relationship with Bruce Arians. But you're right to question these things, that they could factor into it.
Absolutely, for sure. That definitely could play into it because, Brady was a. It seemed like Brady was a big supporter of Brown and did a lot of work to bring him in and was doing a lot of work to kind of keep him on the right track. So him leaving and the way that whole thing went down and the way that Brown was talking about things, maybe that's part of why Brady just chose to retire when he did and to get out of Tampa Bay.
Yeah, for sure. And just to close on the fact that I actually view mental health as very serious and something that shouldn't be laughed at. And so just to clarify, I wish nothing but the best for Antonio Brown. I think that was an unfortunate circumstance that played out. It does strike me that he's someone that, may need some assistance in his life. He's shown some instances where he seems to be pretty clearly out of control. And I don't make light of that. It can be funny in the moment. Some of the memes come across as very humorous. And I think it's important to call out and recognize that Antonio Brown, whatever he's going through, is a human being, deserves respect. And so I say that just because I want to make it clear that that's how I feel about Antonio Brown. And I'm sure Jack does as well. He's a very respectful individual, much like myself. Transitioning into our final topic as we close out here, it is very clear that people are intrigued with the San Francisco 49ers. ESPN Plus, unfortunately behind the paywall. If you don't pay for it, you don't get access. But when you read a recent article put out this morning about Super Bowl favorites and most intriguing teams, and they went down the roster of ESPN reporters and had people say who are their favorites to win the Super Bowl and who's the most intriguing team for them, there were two folks that picked the Niners to win the Super Bowl, those being Stephanie Bell, or maybe it's Stefania Bell. I may have mistyped that in there. And then the other was Matt Bowen, I believe. So we have the Niners, and she picked it as, let's see, a couple of people. Okay, one person, Stephanie Bell, picked the 49ers. Matt Bowen and Eric Moody had the Niners in the Super Bowl, but they had the Bills winning it. Interestingly, Stephanie Bell had the 49ers winning it over the Bills. So all three of those writers are all in on Bills-Niners. I can't fault them. I mean, that is a phenomenal matchup. But the reasoning was for the 49ers winning it all, 49ers over Bills. Twice the bridesmaids in the postseason during the Kyle Shanahan era. The 49ers have the talent to win it all if their heir to the quarterback throne, Trey Lance, continues to develop. Josh Allen and the Bills were a possession away from the Super Bowl, and they will be back. But in the end, the Niners defense, with some incoming improvements in the secondary, she predicts, helped tip the scale in their favor. Do you think that the 49ers are just a trendy pick at this point? Or should the faithful have hope that we really are potentially a Super Bowl team with an unproven quarterback who could be wildly talented?
No, I think the 49ers are a team that I would put them right there where they are. I'd say they're right up at the top. I don't see I don't see a drop off from Jimmy Garoppolo to Trey Lance in year two. I might have seen one at the beginning of 2021, but I don't think there's going to be this massive drop off. The production's still going to be there. It might not all be from the passing game. It might be a little bit more with his legs or what have you, but I think the 49ers are in a good spot here. So I would say, if you're asking me who my Super Bowl teams are, I would say that the 49ers, I would not have a problem with putting them in. And as far as the most intriguing team, or the team that's the team who I think you could say that they'd go up against, I'm going to go with the Las Vegas Raiders.
Ooh, the Las Vegas Raiders. The other trendy pick for most intriguing team was the Packers. Everybody just wants to know, is Aaron Rodgers going to stay? But to me, once you get past that question, it's not as intriguing, right? That's an off-season intrigue, but I don't know about regular season intrigue. This was what Kevin Seifert had to say about choosing the 49ers as his most intriguing team. 49ers, in the past 3 seasons, the 49ers have played in 2 NFC Championship games and 1 Super Bowl. Quarterback Jimmy Garoppolo helped them get there in both cases. He also played a big role in them falling short of a championship. If reports about their intent to move on from Garoppolo are accurate, it will be fascinating to see how they build around presumed replacement Trey Lance, and if they are any better with him in 2022. Jack, to me, that's the critical question for the offseason is, what is the 49ers strategy for bringing back talent and bringing in new talent to surround Trey Lance? And how aggressive are they in bringing that talent in? Meaning, do they extend some of these players to get some additional cap dollars, to take a big cut right now? I tend to think that they are a talented team. They are that intriguing team that should be watched. They should be a favorite to make it back to the Super Bowl. And I tend to agree with your earlier statements that they will be aggressive in some of their own free agents, but not necessarily in bringing in too many big name free agents this offseason.
Yeah, I don't think you're going to see the 49ers be overly aggressive. They don't have the cap space to do that, and they're building. They're trying to build this thing to be successful now and successful 3 or 4 years down the road. Blowing out the cap in a lot of ways doesn't make sense for them. And so I don't foresee the 49ers I just don't foresee them being big spenders in free agency. They might make a splash with a trade or something like that, but I don't see them having that come through free agency with one big dollar deal.
That's well said, Jack. The 49ers have pursued a prudent roster building strategy to this point. There's no reason to believe that they are going to abandon that this offseason. My guess would be if they're going to take a big swing, it would come as an in-season move, a season where it's clear that they're just one or two pieces away from really competing for that Super Bowl, much like bringing in Emmanuel Sanders in the 2019 run. That to me feels much more like a move the Niners might do in pushing more chips into the middle of the table.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I think they're gonna go in with what they have, and if they can make a move during the season, they'll do that. I don't foresee them being big players in free agency. I just don't feel like they have the numbers to do it. So we'll see. We're talking about this now. We have a month before this is going to come down, and we'll have a much better clue in this. I think in about 3 weeks, because at that point we'll have a better understanding of where they are cap wise. Because by that point we should have seen a number of their extensions or reconstructions taking place.
So you're telling me we will get more information at some point, Jack. But until then, we will continue with the speculation.
That's almost as good as saying, hey, the team that scores more is going to win the game, right?
That's right. But hey, it's coming. The answers are coming, ladies and gentlemen, and we will continue to entertain you until then. That's our job. Jack, it is always a pleasure having you on here. We got a couple of hundred people watching right now. Again, I do ask on your way out, please hit that like button if you enjoy the content. If you don't, leave us a mean comment on the page. I thoroughly enjoy those. And go down in the description down there. Follow Jack on Twitter, subscribe to him on YouTube as well, and bookmark that Press Democrat page. Jack, I look forward to our shows next week, hoping we got some breaking news in there, my friend. But if not, like I said, we will continue to entertain, sir.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to Monday, and either we're going to be talking about some breaking 49er news, or we're going to be breaking down the Daytona 500. I'm not sure which. We'll figure it out.
Yes, or maybe going back in time. I love your idea of talking about old Niner teams. We may have to pull that out. I mean, we got time. We got time.
we do.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, I will be back. I'm going to be on 49ers First Takes tomorrow on Aaron's channel. That will be at 4 p.m. on Saturday. Keep an eye on my Twitter handle because I may go live on my channel as well. Jack, do you have a show coming up this weekend over on the channel?
I don't. I'm taking the weekend off. Going to step away a little bit, and but I'll be back Monday with you, and then Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. Try to hit it pretty hard, and then the weekends are a little bit off. So
yeah, you got to take some time, and I like that too because that lets me promote the fact that your next guest is me, and that's important, right? We got to call that out. We got to let the people know. All right. Thank you so much for being here, everybody, and until next time, you know the drill. Cheers, faithful.